Hello, it's Mary. I hope that you are doing well. Welcome to Science in the Kitchen, where today we will be exploring crystals. So we are going to grow sodium chloride crystals, or what we normally call salt, and we'll observe their growth over time. So the part of this that we will do today won't take very much time. And then you will be able to observe over a period of 2 days to 3 weeks, or longer if you wish, the growth of your sodium chloride crystals. For this process, you will be using boiling water. So you want to be careful and you want to get some help. To make our crystals, we will need a half cup of boiling water. To measure the boiling water, I have a heat-tolerant measuring cup. You will want a half cup of non-iodized salt. I have ice cream or rock salt. You could also use just plain table salt. You could use kosher salt, sea salt, whatever form you want to use your salt in. It all works. It just works best if it's non-iodized. So whatever's handy, I'd use that. A jar. So last time I did this, and you'll see that later, I used a 16-ounce jar. All I have around the house today is an old salad dressing jar. So it's a glass 10-ounce jar. That's what I'll be using today. Crochet yarn. And then I have a bamboo skewer. You could also use a pencil. You could instead use a popsicle stick. You just need something to tie the string to. So what I did was I cut my crochet yarn and I tied it, just made a regular knot, tied it around the skewer. Then I measured it to make sure that it was shorter than the jar is, so it's not going to touch the bottom of the jar when I put it in there. And then I can just put it in there and use it like that. So not touching the bottom, but not too short. If it's too short, it won't be in your solution. You want something to stir with. So I have a wooden handled silicone spatula. You can use a silicone spoon. You can use a wooden spoon. You don't want to use anything metal though, because that gets hot. You need something to heat the water in. I just used my hot water kettle. You can use the microwave and just heat it in there. You can use a pan on the stovetop and heat it that way. Whatever works, just be careful because it is boiling water. If you would like your sodium chloride crystals to have a color, you can use food coloring. I just prefer them in their natural state, so that's what I did. I left out the food coloring. Paper towels are always handy too. An optional item is a strainer. And I just cut a piece of paper towel to fit inside the strainer. You may also want some kind of magnifying glass for when your crystals are in the process of forming, so you can look at them. Completely optional. There are two processes at work here that we are going to take advantage of. So first we are going to create a super saturated solution. So if you took salt at room temperature and dissolved it in room temperature water, a certain amount of salt would dissolve in that amount of water that you have. You'd get to a point where you would not be able to stir any more in and have it dissolved. If you have hot water, you can dissolve more of the salt in it. So if you took boiling water, dissolved salt in it, and then cooled it to room temperature, you have a super saturated solution. We are going to make that today. Secondly, after we've created our super saturated solution, we are going to use evaporation to create our crystals. So we're just going to let the water evaporate off of our sodium chloride solution, and that is how we will get our crystals. I always, as we did already, I prepare this step before I get to the point where I need it. So I have the string tied to the skewer and measured before I ever get to the point where I need it, because you don't want to try to be measuring your string when you have a boiling hot solution. We are going to get started. I'm going to bring you in closer so you can see what's going on. So I have removed some of the things that we do not yet need. I've heated my water, and so I am going to measure a half cup into this measure cup. So I've got a half cup of water in there. We're going to start by mixing in the salt, and I'm just going to grab some and start stirring it in there. And you can see some of it is dissolving. It's not all dissolved. But when we get to the point where most of that is dissolved, I'm just going to throw in another handful. And we're going to keep adding handfuls of salt until we are at the point where it just will not dissolve anymore. And when we get to that point, then we're going to pour all of the solution, except for the salt. The salt grains that are in the bottom, we don't want to get into the solution, but we'll pour that into our jar that we got ready. Now, because, and I'll show you again, it's dissolving still. There are some grains on the bottom. If you were using table salt or kosher salt or sea salt, it would, in all likelihood, dissolve faster than my big old rock salt does. Because my grains in rock salt are pretty big. And even though there's some in there, still at the bottom, I'm going to throw some more in. And when I observe that no more is dissolving, then I'm just going to stop that. And I'd say that I've gotten a quarter cup in there already. And to me, it looks like it is no longer dissolving. So I am going to get my jar that I'm using. And like I said, I'm doing the sieve with the paper towel on it. And so I am just going to start pouring it in there. So if you didn't have the sieve and the paper towel, what you would do is pour all of the water until you got to the part where the salt grains were, and then you would just not pour the salt grains in. So that is what my jar looks like. And now I'm just going to place my bamboo skewer on top. If we look, we can see the string hanging down in there, and you can tell that it is not touching the bottom. Now you just want to take that and place that somewhere where it's not going to be disturbed for a few days. As it sits, the solution is going to be drawn up your string. The water is going to evaporate out of the solution, and you'll be left with crystals of salt forming on the string, and sometimes it comes up and grows over the top. If you wanted to add food color, you could add it. You could take the skewer out and add it into your solution now. And basically, at this point, you're just patiently waiting, checking on your jar and your string, and watching the salt crystals develop. So it'll be a couple days before your crystals are noticeable. So like I said, you're going to want to put it in a safe place where it won't be disturbed, and you can observe it and see when you start noticing crystals. The longer you leave the string in the solution, the more solution is going to be drawn up the string, the more sodium chloride salt crystals will grow on your string. So I started this about 3 weeks ago in a different jar. So I want to show you my crystals that grew. So keep in mind that it started off looking exactly like that. Now it looks like that. And whereas the string toward the back, the new one that I'm putting back into that jar, is floppy, this one with the dried salt crystals on it is not floppy at all. So we can notice that a lot of crystals have grown on here. So this is a point where if you had a good magnifying glass, you could take a look at your crystals in the magnifying glass. So what they look like, any other observations that you make. You notice right at the bottom you can see that bigger crystal of salt right there. And there is just a close-up of my salt crystals. So what in the natural world would form like that? You may have seen caves with stalactites or stalagmites. For a stalactite, there are minerals dissolved in the water. As it drips down, the water evaporates off and leaves the minerals behind. As it hits the floor, the water again evaporates off, and the minerals left behind form the stalagmites on the floor of the cave, or the stalactites on the ceiling of the cave. So I really do hope that you try this one. It was really very interesting watching my sodium chloride crystals form over a period of time. Until next time, I hope that you keep exploring your world and using your creativity to improve it. Thank you.